Pakistani or Demostic Alliance. It's me, Speckles1000 here, coming at you with another video. In this video, I am going to be doing taking 20 dragons and turning them into D&D characters, which was an idea I let one of my friends in real life, or IRL, choose because she's graduating this year. So without further ado, let's roll intro, let's get into this video, and let's go. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. Okay, so for the first one. The first one, as you can most likely tell, I had to base this one off my Tornado Shell Dragon. And this was the first one my friend picked out. And trust me, this one was by far one of the easier ones. The other ones were quite difficult. The race just made sense for it, being an airbending dragon. So, that's what I went with. I also really heavily inspired this one from a design I found of a Air Genasi cleric. It was the first one that came to mind. But other than that, the colors were mostly from the actual picture and the race, but very little of it actually came from the dragon. I was actually hoping to incorporate more colors from the dragons, but I do that with I do a lot of that with one closer to the end of this video. But let's get into the lore. Hello everyone, it's me, Dynamos, and I just want to talk to you about why the fuck I keep forgetting about how many people I have to talk over sometimes. Well, anyways, let's get into the first one. This first one, his name is Tristan. He's an Air Genasi, and he's a cleric. He's a cleric that is more or less a cleric that does do a lot of healing, yes, but he mostly uses his staff or spear-like thing to pretty much poke enemies to death. He also uses any air spell he can get access to deal with significant damage. He can, but one of his favorite spells he has access to, and if he doesn't have access to it, he will most likely find a way to put it into a spell stone or something, is Sheild. And this is because it increases his defense, but he also likes mage armor and pretty much any other defense-based spell. This is because he's more or less a more balanced kind of fighter. He likes to help his teammates, but also fight himself. He mostly uses his spear as a more like a wand at times to channel his magic. Some people say he's a sorcerer because of what he can do. The guy isn't. He's a full-on cleric. Now, I don't really know. He's a life domain cleric for the record, and he doesn't really do much else except for fight. But he's a really nice guy once you get to know him. Okay, for the next one, I couldn't really think of a good name or a good design. So it's more or less in the lore what he can do. But as for the reason why I put Sorcerer Paladin is because Sorcerer has the extra shield, and Paladin because, well, it just makes more sense because I was thinking, okay, what class in D&D most likely has really high defense stat? And the first one that came to mind was a paladin. Now, I don't really know what this guy would be a paladin of, but hey. Now, he's one of them that I tried to take more color from the actual dragon, but it just didn't work out in my favor. So I transitioned into using colors that I think that would fit the character. It didn't do the character justice, in my opinion, but it kind of worked out pretty well. Okay, so for this next one, I want to talk to you about someone named Nafumi. His race is a variant human. Well, the reason why he's a variant human is because, well, variant humans are actually quite stronger than regular humans. They have a higher constitution, meaning they are a lot harder to get drunk. But the interesting thing about this guy is he's a Sorcerer Paladin. Now, but for some reason, he can't really pick up a weapon. Something about him being cursed not be able to pick up any weapon at all, except for shields. No clue why or how this happened, but hey, I might be an overseer, but I can't tell you that much about the inhabitants of my world. I'm not omnipotent, but trust me, there are a few people who are, and boy, they're scary. Now, there is some backstory on this guy. I have on him. He has a quote-unquote slave, demi-human, but in reality, it's just he just bought her off of a slave trader, and she decided that she's going to stay his slave. She also has a curse on her that she'll be shocked if she ever disobeys him. But funny enough, she never really disobeys him. This guy Nafumi was actually falsely charged as a rapist, but nope, that princess was a bench. And let's just say he had his name cleared up for that. And he can pretty much dodge pretty much anything using his special shields. He has one smaller shield that he can use as a arcing focus, and a bigger shield that he can use as pretty much as a defense. It's a pretty impressive shield. Let's get on to the next one, shall we? Now, for the next one, this one was actually by far the simpler one, but I forgot about the thing that the Wrestling Dragon couldn't breathe fire. I made a mistake. But other than that, the idea was really simple and really built for this. I know I said really a lot, but it just made a lot of sense for the thing to be a barbarian. I couldn't think of a better name than Wrath. Like Wrath from Ben 10 on... Was it Ben 10... Ultimate Alien Force or Alien Force when Wrath was first introduced. But he was just hilarious. And it was pretty simple idea to take Wrath and put him into Tensura. Not really take him and put him in Tensura. Put him in D&D. Pretty much this guy has Wrath's personality. Okay. This next one is, how do you say, by far more aggressive than the last two people. What I mean by that, he is pretty much the incarnation of the god of Wrath. His name is, well, Wrath, without, not W-A-T-H, but R-A-T-H. Wrath is a very aggressive, red dragonborn. His, he doesn't wear a shirt, more or less wears a straps and wears and wields two axes at all times. He just finds that it's most fitting for him. Now, in his calm state, it isn't really calm. He's not really ever calm, but when he's not as aggressive, or should I say, he's a, snarky and somewhat egotistical person. His alignment is more or less chaotic neutral, leaning on, it's a weird one, to be honest. He doesn't care about rules, but he will protect people. You do something to someone he does care about, he will kill you. But he would also break laws himself, to be honest. He can breathe fire, but he doesn't really use it that often. He sees it as a coward's way to fight. Prefers to fight with his two battle axes. Now, his hide is really thick and actually surprisingly thicker than your average Dragonborns. But other than that, he's a really strong adversary and someone you would not want to fight on the battlefield. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? For the fourth one of today, I had to base this one off of one of the dragons, and pretty much it was the it was the Crackling. No, it's not the Crackling Draku one. It was the it was one of my hybrids. It was my Demostic Black Explosive Paw Wrath Dragon, or Demostic Wrath Explosive Paw. I basically did my best to copy the power set of this one over into the actual character. Although I obviously couldn't do that fully. But, yeah. Most of the idea did go in and did make some sense. Although it was a little pain to get the idea done correctly. Okay, so this one, Damaku, he is a half-orc, and he's a barbarian sorcerer. He does have the ability to rage, but he's a, interesting case. You see, a rage for him is a little bit different from others. Unlike others, he has the ability to actually control his rage. He can rage and gain all the stats and benefits of it, but he will use a very cold and calculating guy while using his rage ability. He is pretty relentless when using it, although his arcane focus is a really interesting one. You see, he found a stick that was basically a one of fireball on steroids. Pretty much it had unlimited uses, but it had a limit of 5 charges. It can only recharge once every short rest or so. Now, he mostly does use it to fight off people, but he can be ridiculously reckless when using it. And the attack is actually a lot more dangerous than most other fireballs, because it actually is extremely dangerous because of the fact that it's inverted. It's cooler in the center, and as it expands, it gets hotter and hotter. So, yeah, I don't really understand how this one works, but it just does. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one, I tried to come up with a name somewhere between Zuku and Bronze, because I made this one a Bronze Dragonborn, because Bronze Dragonborn can breathe lightning. And Zuku, well, he seemed someone who would be capable of fighting, but he doesn't go into a rage. Hence the fighter, but I was thinking, I want to replicate some of the other abilities he has. So that's why I used Sorcerer. It just made sense in my head, and I can see him mostly using a lightning-based spell, like a lightning-based cantrip most of the time, to make up for most of his attacks, and mage armor for extra defense. Okay, so this next one is a very interesting Dragonborn. Name Izone, or is one. Anyways, he is a Bronze Dragonborn, And his classes are Fighter and Sorcerer. He more or less uses the Sorcerer to have access to lightning-based spells to enhance his own lightning breath attack. He also uses a sword for enhanced, well, not really enhanced, but very efficient slashing damage. He also has some steel-toed boots that are actually really reinforced with some really strong material. If I remember correctly, it was adamantine or something. Just one of the strongest metals in this universe, in this world. It's an utter pain if you were to get hit by them. He can also, how do you say? Well, anyways, this also kind of replicates. He can also, but also has a special ability of him shooting lightning and then using a bonus action to kick you as hard as he can. And trust me when I say that his boots, let's just say they would have a +5 to hit. Well, +5 hit. It would hurt a lot. And he's also very efficient at hand-to-hand combat. He also has a arcane focus that's in the shape of a lightning bolt. And it is a turquoise color, which I find really interesting. Turns out it was actually a rock that was struck by lightning sent down from one of the gods when they were somewhat younger and throwing a tantrum. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Okay, so for the next one, it was a little simpler idea. It was based off of my what was it called? I keep forgetting what the name was. My Phantom Amphitere. I didn't want to use an undead race, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go with a Tiefling, because it's a pretty close idea. And I just now realized I missed one piece of coloring on the eye. But anyways, seems fine to me. The idea of the whip was to simulate the tail of the Amphitere, and the wand is using a darkness spell to pretty much just to give the illusion of it using its breath attack that could disorient people. Now for this next one, let's just say she is a feisty one. You double cross her, you're gonna wake up haunted and with multiple weapon marks and a few arrows in your body. Of course, we're talking about the adventurer Fantas, race Tiefling, although people say that she could be an undead. Classes Sorcerer and Ranger. Sorcerer because she wanted to get the access to the spell of darkness and another spell of sleep. And she also wanted because she wanted to use both of these in tandem with each other to make people afraid of the dark and then make them pass out using sleep, or pretty much scaring them till they pass out. Now, the whip is because of the fact she prefers to fight melee not with hand-to-hand combat. Although her favorite enemy to hunt is actually an undead. So she also uses the whip as a forms of grabbing items. She doesn't really use the air bow as much. She just picked it up because you never know whenever you're gonna need it. Now, every now and again, she would actually imbue an arrow with one of her spells of sleep or darkness. She could then shoot the arrow and use that to actually cast a spell and release it. So pretty much like a remote AoE attack. She's very tactful and very intelligent when using her abilities. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Now, the next one's design, I based it off of my first ever dragons. Well, one of the first ever ones, my Demostic Black Dragon. I named this one Diablo because it seemed fitting. Although the classes do make some sense, they don't make as much sense as I would like them to be. And this guy would actually be a very weak build in D&D. Really, that's all I gotta say, other than the fact that I wish that I changed up in the lore that this guy was actually a weird mutated version of a red dragon born that was actually a red half dragon that was born a black color that could spit acid. But hey, I already chose that this guy was a black dragon, half dragon. Okay, so this next guy is by far one of the more aggressive, but yet kind want D&D adventurers you would ever meet. Name Diablo. Race black half dragon. Class is barbarian, fighter, sorcerer. He is also known to go into a rage, but also be a level-headed person. He's actually related to the half-orc Damaku. He's a distant relative. He does use his sorcerer abilities to cast Fireball and a few other very nasty fire-based spells. Although they are not as nasty as some would think, but this guy is a very fearless fighter, and he will hunt you down and fight you. And if you have crossed him, let's just hope that we never meet, because I ain't gonna go anywhere near this guy. I might be a god, but I'm not immortal. As for abilities and Pacific and special attacks for him, he's actually a very level-headed dude when not raging. But for those abilities, when he does rage, he is known to use the two axes like their claws and tear his enemies apart. He would use the sword like a tail and whip it around. He's also a very flexible person, so he can easily replicate a tail whipping someone like a dragon would. But with a sword, it would deal a lot more damage. And that's pretty much. This guy does have some more standard attacks, but they were a lot more complex, so decided not to put them in. Let's get on to the next one, though. I don't know why I named it that. I literally have no blood clue. Maz, Peg, Pagasian, a very funny name. If you can't tell, I based this one off of my Pegasus dragon. I don't even have a clue why I put this one as a fighter class. I don't know why I just thought, I don't really have a lot of single classed ones. But here I am looking at them now, and they are, a good chunk of them are just single class ones. But anyways, his race is an Eric Cocker for the record. Man, this one was quite simple drawing. And due to the Pegasus usually being the Pegasus I drew as a dragon being white, I more or less just colored it fully white with just a few bits of armor here and there. Now, let's get on to the lore. Okay, so this guy is, how do you say, a very interesting name. Pagasian Sussian. Race Aarakocra. Class Fighter. Now, he's actually only around 15, but the age of maturity... But, not age of maturity, the average age of a... Well, average lifespan, of a Aarakocra, which is what he is, is only around 3 years, so 15, he's around mid-age. People call him an old guy, but he's actually really useful. This is because he's not your average Aarakocra. He's actually been blessed by a Pegasus, funny enough. This Pegasus had always had interest in Aarakocras because they were somewhat similar to him in the fact that they were somewhat like animals with wings. Now, you see, this Pegasus also had a special ability, thanks to the gods, to turn into a human with wings. Some people were mistaken him for an Aasimar or an angel. But he was in reality just a regular Pegasus that took on the form of a winged variant human. He actually met with Pagasian Sussian once and told him that he was actually a Pegasus. Pagasian Sussian was only around 13 when he met this guy, and he didn't really believe him. Let's just say, having gifts from the gods gives you certain abilities, and after the guy turned into a Pegasus and turned back into his human form, Pagasian Sussian believed him, and he granted Pagasian Sussian with the ability to live pretty much forever. He's a very, very old he's very old now, but he only says that his age is 15. He just ages a lot slower. Okay, the last one was kind of funny. Although this one is a little funnier, this one's a black half-dragon I named Mary. Oh man, that was kind of funny. And I did base him off of my Manticore dragon. And although I wish I did add a few different elements to that dragon design. Well, incorporating more elements of the dragon design. But, hey, you get what you get. And you can't really throw a fit once the drawing is done. That is, unless you don't really like it. I do actually really like the design. Although I wish I added more stuff to it. Stuff mean more details. It's a very simple drawing idea. But, hey, it does turn out pretty well. Okay, so, for this guy, let's just say that his parents were hoping for a daughter, so they pre-named their child Mary. But they got with a black half-dragon. His classes are Barbarian and Sorcerer. He was actually very, very happy to be born, and his parents, one was a rare, nice black dragon, and a chaotic neutral, bordering on chaotic good human. He took on his parents' qualities of a chaotic, neutral, black half-dragon. He doesn't have his breath weapon, but what he does make up for is his enhanced fighting capabilities. And due to his draconic bloodline, thanks to his mother, he has the ability to use magic. Now, his signature weapons is a wand that his mother gave him, which is more or less some parts that his mother gave him out of her hoard, and a battle axe his father gave him. He chopped the axe down a bit and added a a metal pike to the end of it, a small stake, if you would will, to make it up for his fighting capabilities. It has around a 3-foot reach, and he mostly uses it for dirty tactics, as trapping and snagging opponents. Now, he also has the ability to throw it very far and very fast because he is so strong, and he more or less uses a spell of poison to just really incapacitate people. It's his favorite way to hunt. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Okay, due to this one being the how do you say this? With this being my Phoenix dragon, I took the idea of a phoenix being able to reincarnate. So that is exactly what I did, and I also got the idea to make this character, but it was also a very funny character concept that would actually make a lot of sense in D&D, the actual game. This idea was that this was a fire genasi sorcerer that was originally named Phoenix, but my friend who wanted me to do this renamed him Felix. So said that he should have been named Felix. So that's why I changed the name to. But I can see his full name being Felix Phoenix. But hey, and the stone in his forehead is actually the main center focal point, whatever you want to call it, of this idea. Being able to revive himself by using Revivify or Resurrection and casting it into the stone, and so that way whenever he dies, he gets resurrected. Okay, now for this next one, his name is Felix, and he's a Fire Genasi class sorcerer. He does mostly use fire-based spells, but he does have his own section of healing spells that he would use on his friends to help them. Now, he can be kind of ego-central at times when using a fire-based spell, because he's channeling what he calls the best element. Now, he knows that some elements are better than others at times, but he thinks firepower can firepower literally and figuratively can solve any problem whatsoever. And boy, oh boy, was he a shock for a rude awakening. You see, this one time he was using fire-based attacks on a water elemental. Let's just say the water elemental was getting boiled, and literally and figuratively. So they literally started to drown him, and when we tried using more fire-based spells, it did not really work. As for the stone he has in his forehead, he mostly uses mending on it to keep it there. But the stone has Revivify on it, or Resurrection, whichever one he has the materials for at the time. Pretty much whenever his heartbeat stops, so a few seconds later, he gets right back up, pulls the thing out, heals himself, and then proceeds to beat you to death. And then afterwards, he will refill it with more magic. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, for the next one I used my Skeletal dragon, and pretty much it was a regular a regular Minecraft skeleton, which I turned into a dragon. It came out to be a good idea, so I decided to have this guy be in half-elf. And I was trying to think of a way to pay and give the homage to the actual skeleton idea. Name part well, what I based him off of. So I decided that his favorite enemy would be an undead, and he mostly was a bow and arrow, but he also has a skull and 2 skull patterns on his shoulders, and they are also, and his clothing is also gray to mimic like the bone color I used for the actual dragon bones of the skeletal dragon. Okay, it's me, Donna Morse, and let's just say this next one was by far a really, really interesting person to look into. You see, his family was killed by a horde of undead, and the person who took them in was actually a former henchman of the necromancer. He named the guy Skell, because most of the creatures that killed his parents were skeletons. His race is half-elf. His father was a human, mother was a high elf. So, he does not lack in the looks department. So, ever since that day, though, he has had an unbridled hatred toward any undead, although he does tolerate some sentient undead. Sentient undeads he classifies as undeads that actually have some sense to them, as he would say. He is by far one of the best marksmen in the actual world. Well, actual world of this universe. Because of his exceptional ability to use the bow and arrow to hit pretty much anything from a few hundred feet away. Let's just say you do not want to be on the receiving end of that arrow, because he could lodge it in any place he wants. And one of his ancestors actually being a wood elf doesn't really help either. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Okay, this one was originally supposed to be a male named Ilian, but I changed it to Iliana. Finally, I should say that correctly. I decided to make this one Tiefling because the one that I based off of was the creature was a dragon based off an evoker. So this one, I can see this one mostly using Unseen Servant. Using Unseen Servant a whole lot, or having a bunch of familiars, or whatever. In other words, pretty smart move, especially because the race I used, the class I used was Sorcerer. And this is what I was talking about, where this is the one from earlier that I mentioned, that I used more color based off of the actual creature design and the actual clothing. It actually did turn out really well for the clothing and the actual overall design of it. The only real thing is that I didn't look up what an unseen servant looks like. Hence the reason why I just have like a little twisting ball of air. So, yeah, turned out pretty well though. Now, this next one was by far one of the more interesting people I've looked into in my world. Name, Iliana. Race, Tiefling. Class, Sorcerer. Iliana comes because she's actually one of the kinds of people that mostly use an illusion to trick them. Some people think that she is a wizard with the illusionary school of magic, but in reality, she isn't a wizard. She is actually a sorcerer. She is a very, very difficult sorcerer to beat, because she mostly uses her unseen servant spells, and will use minor illusion, major illusion, to trick people and make them think they're going crazy. she also has robes that is reminiscent of a cult known as the Illusioners. The Illusioners are by far a very mysterious group of cultists. Although she is a not de facto, she's a runaway from them. She doesn't really agree with their idea of worship. So she was like, pretty much like, frick this, I'm out. And she just left. They're actually looking for her because she was actually wanted now under the Illusioner's cult. So she lives a life on the run as an adventurer. Stopping in different cities to pick up on some quests to actually get some money. So that's all I have for her. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, now for the next one I used a the Purple Phantom, which was a dragon originally created by Joker Joe, or now known as JoJo. And I was trying to think of a good name for this one and what was a good class. So I decided to talk to my friend about it, and I decided to come up with the idea because of the fact that these guys could go through walls. I decided that this guy could be a rogue. Because, rogues are traditionally really sneaky people. But I decided that, you know what, I also want to use the colors. So I'm thinking that this guy is something like Robin Hood. He most likely looks into what kind of colors the people live, the colors of people's houses, and what the interior looks like before he actually robs them. That's how he's like Robin Hood. He steals from the rich and gives to the poor, but he would also ambush people in areas that were high crime stake areas. Hello again. Now this is the next one, and let's just say Spectre is a very interesting half-orc. And that is because he's actually not really like other half-orcs. He's a blonde. Because of that, traditionally orcs have a dark hair color. And he does have he's also a very scrawny and not as intimidating orc. Usually half-orcs for that matter, are very big and intimidating. He does have the height to his advantage, yes, but he's a very sneaky guy. You see, he was always fond of using his short stature compared to other half-orcs to his advantage and sneaking around. He would use this to pull pranks on people, but eventually he saw that the rich people were starting to abuse their power and wealth to get out of paying taxes and stuff like that. And they were also garnishing other people's wages just because they felt like it and they wanted more money. So he decided to become something like Robin Hood, in the sense that he literally stole from the rich and gave it back to the poor. Now, he actually does, funny enough, steal from the rich and give to the poor, but what he does is he usually sneaks into their houses, find what kinds of color they have for their carpeting and stuff, and then make a uniform or costume, or just reworks his own costume or outfit to match their color. He's actually gotten his own hands on a bag of holding, which he uses to store his wardrobe of a variety of clothing that matches different types of floor patterns and, funny enough, colors. So, yeah. He would also ambush people because he's so sneaky. It's like he's literally running through walls, and he would hide out in abandoned buildings to corner people that he was actually contracted to kill. Okay, this one, the colors didn't work out. This one I don't really like because of the color palette I used. I mostly try to use the colors based off of the dragon I used, which was one of my hybrids. It was the last hybrid I made that I was tracing and coloring and not using the bucket tool. I didn't find the bucket tool until after I made this dragon and made the first of my many D&D characters. So, yeah. This one I did actually use the bucket tool for. This one is named Kenon, and his race was a Tiefling, because it was really the only thing I could think of. And he's a fire sorcerer rogue. It's a very simple idea. You can use magic, which is mostly a poison that could paralyze people, paralysis, stuff like that. I would go more into it in the lore bit, but I could actually think this guy would actually be a fun character to play an actual D&D game because of the multi-class, and would actually be a really interesting idea. So, yeah, that's really all I gotta say for this character and then the side notes. But, due to this guy's conniving nature, I should start off with something first. Name, Kenon. Race, Tiefling. Classes, Fighter, Sorcerer, Rogue. He's a very sneaky little guy. And he mostly uses a shield when fighting. He's known to use this to reflect the areas surrounding him. If there's a mirror where he was standing, he could really well trick you into thinking that he is the mirror. But his shield is a really interesting shield. It's a artifact that can actually make him appear invisible. That's if you don't focus enough. And he does have a whip that he does use as... We can actually use both of these as an arcane focus due to both of them having some magical properties to them. His green scarf comes from a scarf that an old friend of him gave to him. He's very sneaky, like I said, and his conniving nature has led him into using the magic, like acid and stuff like that, like poison paralysis, to get out of trouble. He's a very tactful and conniving when using it, hence his conniving nature. Although, that's pretty much for this guy. Okay, this next one was by far more colorful and made a lot more sense in the color palette. I used my Gluttonis slime dragon for this one. I wish I could say that I used absorb elements as a spell in this drawing, but I didn't. And I wish I did. It would have made a lot of sense too, but I just didn't. Although it did turn out really well, to be honest. The overall drawing came out really well, especially when I was basing off of by far one of my favorite drawings. And let's just say that this is actually one of my favorite drawings. Not because of the fact that it's a version of Rimuru, but mainly because of the fact that I actually managed to nearly correctly actually, incorporate a sword design I liked. The hilt / guard-like detail is a really interesting, not really interesting, but really cool design. Although I wish I made it more intricate and added a lot more detail to it. But hey, I'm still a newbie artist. And I'm getting better, I can tell you that much. Okay, this guy is named Remunus, race, water genasi. Classes, sorcerer and fighter. He would most likely use his water spells and absorb element spell to absorb pretty much any incoming attack. And funny enough, he would actually open his mouth to pretend like he's eating the elements. It's a very funny idea that he does. It's like he's absorbing them. And then let's say he used a wind element attack on him. He would pretty much use absorb elements and then proceed to shoot you with one of his own wind element attacks. It's a very funny attack and fighting style he has. Although he does use his wand, but it's actually more like a staff. It actually has like a something like a glaive attached to the end of it. But due to being a fighter, he does carry around a sword that is actually very deadly because of the fact that the hilt has some pretty deadly coral on it. And let's just say that you do not want to be on the receiving end of one of those prods from the tip of the blade. Okay, so for the next one, I based this one off of my Owl Beast Dragon, my Feathered Owl Beastie Amphitere, or Owl Beast. Pretty much it was Ida. And that is the name I gave to this one, Ida. It turned out to be a somewhat good idea because I was basing it off of Ida, the Owl Beast form, but then again, it didn't really seem a good idea now, but hey. Then again, the Owl Beast does appear to be a harpy, although the Aarakocra race was actually a lot more fitting for it. It actually was a really cool idea. Although, I wish Aarakocra lived longer. So, without further ado, this lore for this one. Okay. This one is named, this adventurer is named Ida. Race, Aarakocra. Classes, sorcerer and barbarian. Barbarian because of the fact that she was cursed to go into a rage whenever someone hurt someone close to her. Although this did trigger a class that was given to her unknowingly. The class of barbarian. This triggered her rage, and let's just say, due to the class, it was actually able to help her control the curse, and pretty much just made it more powerful in some regards. She can still use magic, but she goes nearly feral, though. But although she has learned to control it and accept the curse, pretty much turn it into a blessing. Using it, it amplifies her ability to focus and concentrate a lot more. And due to this, she now has one golden eye and one silver gray eye. Although she does have a staff that was actually made of some very rare type of wood that is actually very sought after because of the fact that it's high in magical power. But she uses it as an arcane focus, and the gem she uses as well is also made of another rare material that is, again, highly concentrated magical energy within it. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so for the next one, this one was by far one of the trickier ones to come up with. I came up with this one for Ken because Ken Kaneki was the main character of Tokyo Ghoul, which is what I based it off of, and also this one is the dragon I used was the Kagune King. By far one of my favorite dragons, to be honest. Made this one a half-orc because, they are relentless. That's actually a racial trait they all have. And a fighter barbarian multi-class. Now, other than that, I did add some of the red onto the clothing. Although I wish I made the metal like a dark gray, because that would actually make some sense because of a Kokaku type Kagune, because that would actually show you that, hey, these are actually made of, well, they're not made out of, but they're supposed to represent the ghoul weapons, and I should have also gave this guy a shield. But, hey, it's what you got, and also then again, I wish I did make him an Aarakocra, because that would have just made things a lot easier. But anyways, on to the lore for this guy. So, this one is named, Ken. This next one, that is, and he's a half-orc. His classes are barbarian, well, fighter and barbarian anyways. Using his relentless race feature, he is a very, very relentless, pun thing intended, fighter. And he does use his rage quite frequently, using it almost every single day as max as he can. But trust me, he is very efficient in using both axes and swords. So, saying that you can beat this guy in a fight is like asking a dragon to, a black dragon to be a nice person. You most likely couldn't convince the black dragon to be a good person. But you have a high chance of beating this guy in a fight than that. Then again, he does have a orb of magic missile attached to the bottom of one of his axes, and it had, much like another one's weapon, this orb has unlimited charges, well, unlimited uses, but it only has 3 charges per day. So, yeah, and each cast of magic missile has up to 3 bolts. So that's 9 bolts in total. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this next one, I named him Mino. It's not very clever. Although I do realize this now, that he looks more like my Minotaur hero. But, hey, I can't change it now. Because I could, but it would just take up more time, and I actually do really like how this one turned out. Although the head should have been like a bull face, but I did give him a nose ring. I think this guy would be more like a rare quote unquote mutated type, but more or less he uses a hood to hide his horns, and he's just more or less known as a freakishly tall human that has an obsession with fur coats. When he's hiding, that is. But when he's adventuring, he mostly goes by another name, most likely just shortened. And other than that, I gave him great weapon fighting, and I gave him a 2-handed sword for his great weapon fighting style. Other than that, it overall came out to be a good idea for this character. Okay, this one is named Mino. Race Minotaur. Class Barbarian. Unlike most other barbarians, he's actually a very nice guy, and he's not really mean all the time. Mino is what you would classify as a rare, mutated type of Minotaur. He looks more human in nature, mostly his face, although he does have horns on his head, although not as big as most of his species. His most of his parents were actually both. One was a human, variant human, and the other was a Minotaur that was actually quite nice. His mother was the variant human, and his father was the Minotaur. When his mother gave birth, the father actually really cared about his son, didn't really care about the racial prejudices that his clan had against more human-looking Minotaurs. He actually later left that clan and group because they didn't really care about his son as much as he did. And they pretty much said, if you aren't going to kill that creature, then you should leave. But they were a whole lot more violent than that. So Mino, his father, and his mother all left. And Mino mostly uses cloaks and hoods to hide his appearance, because most people are afraid of him because he stands at a whopping 7 feet tall. And let's just say that can scare the living bejeebers out of some people. But when he's adventuring, he mostly goes by Min. So let's go on to the next one. This one is a character that I based off of a dragon, well, a drake, that I based off of King from the Owl House. Finally, third or fourth time I did this. Overall, I don't really know what King's abilities are, so I'm mostly thinking this guy uses something like a sleep spell or other sound-based spells, with a few other ones sprinkled in here or there. As for the reason why he's a tiefling, hey, this guy is a very and it's really the closest thing I could think of. And the bone does come from a dragon, so it does make some sense. Okay, this one is next to last one is named King. Race Tiefling. Class Sorcerer. Although it does say classes in the file, which is a typo. He is by far one of the most efficient users of the spell Darkness, Sleep, and a few other spells that some people don't really use all that much. He would mostly use these spells to put people to sleep or use them as a sort of echolocation, because he has a heightened sense of hearing and he can hear things pretty far away. And with using Quicken Spell, he can let off rabbit sound waves and concussion one after another. And he does have a very, very sharp sense of hearing when it's darker. For some reason, magical darkness enhances his hearing. I think that's due to the fact that he was born in darkness, and he had to use his hearing more often than his sight. Although he did have dark vision, he didn't really use it often because he found that it was really an ineffective way to find his way around, because it just gave him gray outlines. He more or less later found the remnants of a dragon, and using one of the ribs of the dragon, used it to find his way to the Aarakocra known as Ida, which she later raised him. She does continue to raise him today. Ida is actually now around 56, with a female apprentice named Luce, necessarily from another world. And the reason why Ida could live this long is because of her... because of the fact that she's a part elf. She can switch between her elf and hobby form at will. Although she can only do it once a day. Okay, finally. This is the last one. This one I'm more or less based off of Willow. And I'm thinking that the wand is more or less a joke item. Not really a joke item. But it amplifies, finally, more or less amplifies the magical ability of plant magic. And it was actually a favorite toy of Willow's when she was younger, and it was actually unknown to her used the carcass of a green dragon to make it, which I find kind of funny because green dragons and elves do not really get along all that well. Not whatsoever. And a druid sorcerer, because hey, druids are like the tree huggers of D&D. And wood elf, because hey, was a pretty good idea. And also because they have just makes a lot of sense for this one. And as for sorcerer, reason why, more spells. Okay, this last one of today is known as Willow, and she is a druid sorcerer, and that is her class. She is a wood elf that has the ability to control the plants to her will, yes, and can talk to animals. She actually does have an arcane focus that was actually made by using some bone and scales of a green dragon that was killed by her parents. And both her fathers, that is. This used to be a battle toy of hers, but funny enough, they mostly used the heart and found something that could absorb all the magical energy from the heart of the green dragon, and they put it into an orb that would be that they would later replace with the rattler with from her old toy, which is now her arcane focus. The orb is known as the orb of the green dragon plant controller, or the orb of plant magic. This is because it drastically enhances the user's control over plants and other nature abilities, as well as any poison-based spells. And that's pretty much all for today. This has been Donna Morris, signing off, everyone. Well, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, because I'm afraid that's all the time I got for today. Until next time, subscribe today, join the Sparkers Army, or Demostic Alliance. Goodbye, and peace out, everyone.